Star Wars 7x7, episode 2316. I'm going to take a break from The Mandalorian briefly to talk about another Star Wars project that got referenced, possibly, in a way, on a recent podcast. And it's not a project that exists, but it's one that a lot of Star Wars fans would like to see happen. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, we haven't really talked about this very much on the podcast at all, and I'm kind of surprised to realize that that's the case, but there has been a movement among Star Wars fans to see a sequel for Solo, a Star Wars story, and this has been particularly driven by the Resistance Broadcast podcast, which is the podcast of Star Wars Newsnet. You've probably heard me talk about Star Wars Newsnet on this podcast a few times because they are one of a couple of websites that seems to have reliable rumors, leaks, spoilers kind of information. And obviously when we talk about stuff that they publish, we do it with all the disclaimers in case that's something that you want to avoid. But as I've been podcasting for Star Wars 7x7 over the years, I've watched them and seen that they are doing very good work. And so, yeah, it's definitely one of the Star Wars rumor, leak, spoiler sources that I trust. So, when it comes to Solo, they are a driving force behind the viral social media Make Solo 2 Happen campaign, and it has been acknowledged by lots of folks involved in the making of Solo, a Star Wars story, including director Ron Howard and co-writer Jon Kasdan. So the reason why we're talking about it today is because director Ron Howard appeared on a podcast called Lights, Camera, Barstool, which is apparently a movie-related podcast run by the very popular Barstool Sports brand, and he was asked about the possibility of a sequel to Solo, a Star Wars story, and whether anything could be happening. So this is what he said, quote unquote, and this was also brought to my attention by seeing it on Star Wars Newsnet's site. Ron Howard says, "No rumblings though, and this is not a spoiler or anything, but I think there is interest in those characters. I think there's interest in the gangster world somewhere down the line. But I can assure you there is nothing being developed right now for a movie or Disney+. But one great thing is there's been a lot of affection shown for Solo, and so of course that keeps boding well for them to eventually turn it around," quote unquote. In the same story that Star Wars Newsnet published where they talked about that particular appearance on the podcast and the quote, also mentioned Jon Kasdan tweeting something about something that didn't make it into the original Solo, a Star Wars story, and said, I guess it'll have to wait for Solo 2. And this was just recently tweeted, October 30th, if I remember the date. And yeah, that's a tongue-in-cheek thing, right? Because as Ron Howard said, there's nothing in development. He's not trying to get people's hopes up in a way that would be inauthentic or anything like that. He's just saying that the fan interest and passion definitely bodes well for the possibility down the line, but he was very clear in saying that there's nothing being developed right now for a movie or Disney+. Although he does say that he thinks there is interest in the gangster world somewhere down the line, but let's not read too much into that. And yet, I'm saying that, but I am going to read something into this because Ron Howard had been a vocal proponent of the possibility of returning to Willow, right? Returning to that storytelling situation. And Jon Kasdan is involved in the Willow series that is coming to Disney+, and that will be hopefully going into production next year. Now, of course, Ron Howard directed the original Willow, but he's not directing the new one. He's serving as an executive producer. And one would imagine that if there were to be a sequel to Solo, a Star Wars story in some fashion or another, whether it happens in movie form or whether it's a series of some kind on Disney+, that he probably would not direct that either, that he would serve also as an executive producer. In other words, it wouldn't require a tremendous commitment from him to make Solo 2 happen. It would only require an executive producer level of commitment, which is definitely less time intensive compared to a director, right? And I have said on the podcast before that despite the fact that Solo did not get the greatest of critics' reviews and did not do as well as people hoped it would at the box office, it's still a fun ride, and it's one that doesn't have the same gravitas as the Skywalker saga does, or the stakes comparatively that Rogue One did, but it's still a good bit of cinema fun, and it works on the small screen. It's definitely great viewing at home as well. It seems like it would thrive in a Disney Plus situation, and so the idea of continuing it in a Disney Plus situation would be spectacular as well. And so, to that point, the Star Wars live action development situation for Disney Plus, Bob Iger has been pretty clear about the fact that movies for Star Wars will not happen on Disney Plus. It's only going to be series of some kind, whether ongoing like The Mandalorian or limited like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is going to be. And as far as when it could happen, the fact that Ron Howard is saying that they're maybe interested in a gangster world somewhere down the line, well, that kind of actually reflects on a bit of Mandalorian rumor after all, and I will address that in just a moment. Before I get to that, though, just a quick public service announcement note. I've been talking about the election here in the United States over the last couple of days, and as I'm recording this right now, counting ballots has stopped in a few of the remaining states for the evening. A couple of them are still ongoing. The final calls have not been made yet as to, all 50 states and the District of Columbia being done and not having a president officially declared. That being said, just another moment to advocate for stepping away from social media, stepping away from news cycles, and breathing as much as you possibly can. This is a process where we knew going in that not all the votes would be counted on election day, and in some cases there were states that weren't even allowed to start counting in the early votes and the mail-in votes and the absentee ballots and stuff until election day itself was over even. So yeah, take a moment, breathe, relax, and we'll see where things end up. All right, so the reason why I'm connecting this whole, gangster story somewhere down the line with The Mandalorian is because there's a rumor kicking around that The Mandalorian is going to be limited to 5 seasons. That just came out. I think that We Got This Covered people are saying that one, and they're saying that they've had sources give them other rumors and leaks and spoilers that have been confirmed, although the ones that they shared were not about Star Wars related stuff. That being said, once The Mandalorian is done, something's going to need to replace it. So I think a gangster kind of series would be pretty fun. And if it's Solo related, then so much the better. And I'd love to hear what you think about the possibility of a sequel for Solo: A Star Wars Story. So chime in wherever there's a comment section, YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook for the podcast, or at home base at sw7x7.com. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.